Speaking of bringing things to it, one of the things that always happens in science fiction, fantasy, and I would imagine in Leverage, because, you know, there's Parker and there's Elliot, is a good fight scene.
Yes.
How much are you able to transfer what you know as a black belt?
It's funny. It's changed. I've always enjoyed writing fight scenes because it's something that interested me just as you know, a layperson. And a lot of the fiction that I've done, I've written a lot of Klingon fiction, I've written a lot of superhero fiction, both of which have a lot of, you know, full contact. But I was writing this stuff long before I started training. I didn't start training in the martial arts until the fall of 2004. So once I started studying the martial arts, it became at once both easier and harder to do the fight scenes. I think the technical aspects of it are more accurate, and I tend now to have a better idea of how the violence actually works.
And what it does to the body when it impacts.
Yeah, so I think I have a better feel for that. The problem is I know a little too much, and I have to dial it back and make sure I don't get too technical about it, because that actually isn't interesting for people who don't study martial arts to read. And it's been an interesting challenge. I think in a lot of ways I was better off when I didn't know what I was talking about. I mean, I never had any trouble writing fight scenes. So it's you know, it's a mixed blessing.
It's a mixed
But
blessing.
it certainly it has helped in some ways. One thing I have been able to do is actually write characters who study martial arts convincingly, which I've done a couple of times.
Which characters would that be?
There's some side characters here and there on in various stories, as well as in one case, I just did a thriller novella featuring a reporter, a New York reporter named Joe Lombardo, who is also a black belt. Which, and I did the story I did with him included him getting into a couple of fights. So
that would be a direct application there.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And there've been a couple of other side characters who I've had, you know, doing martial arts in various stages. I think Joe is the only one who's an actual main character. But that added to the fun of it. So.
What's next? You've mentioned the Leverage novel. You've mentioned the new Precinct novels. What else is on your horizon?
I've got another fantastical police procedural series called SCPD, which stands for Super City Police Department. It does for superhero fiction what Dragon Precinct does for fantasy. It's about cops in a modern metropolis. It's a made-up city called Super City, which is very well populated with superheroes. You know, it's a world in which superheroes exist, and there are actually superheroes all over the place, but for whatever reason, most of them are in Super City. In the same way in the Marvel Universe, most of them are in New York. So, and what I'm doing is what, say, the Gotham City Police Department or the Metropolis Police Department or Marvel's NYPD would have to deal with on a regular basis. It was prompted, the first book is called The Case of the Claw, that came out last year. The second book will be called Avenging Amethyst. I'm thinking that'll be out in 2013, probably. I was originally hoping to get it out this year, but with the Leverage novel and some other stuff, I had to push that back. But that's on the agenda. I have a couple of original things that I haven't even finished yet that I'm working on with my agent that I want to start sending out. One is a mystery and one is science fiction. I'm also involved with a couple of shared world things. The thriller I mentioned is something I'm doing with a guy named Stephen Saville and a bunch of other authors, where Stephen comes up with the basic concept and then we all do little novellas based on it under the title Viral. The first story we did actually focused on something that's been in the headlines lately, is the CIA sort of suborning immunization programs in third world countries in order to further their anti-terrorist agenda. It was actually used on an episode of NCIS too recently. We thought that was interesting fodder for fiction. My story is about a reporter who finds out about it and the consequences to him. And I'm probably going to be doing more with Steve for other thriller stories, and I'm actually now contemplating doing more with that character, because I'm actually going to really like the character of Joe Lombardo, so who knows. Jonathan Mayberry invited me to participate in a project called V-Wars, which is a vampire anthology, which, it's a great concept. It's a virus winds up, spreads around, and activates dormant portions of people's DNA, what some scientists have called junk DNA. And they turn into vampires, but they don't turn into Bram Stoker's vampires or Anne Rice's vampires or Joss Whedon's vampires or, thank goodness, Stephenie Meyer's vampires. They turn into whatever the vampire is in the folklore of their ethnic heritage. So a Chinese person turns into a hopping ghost. My character is a Haitian who turns into a loup garou. You know, that sort of thing. It's very much steeped in folklore rather than popular culture. And my particular story is called The Ballad of Big Charlie, and it's about one person who suffers from the virus who is a politician. He's a district attorney in the Bronx. He's running for re-election and reveals he has the condition, and then after he does actually win re-election, because it's, you know, it's a small, well, comparatively small, he's a community leader, and is well liked among the people of the Bronx, and then he decides a year later to run for senator. On the national stage, things are much different, and things go rather badly for him.
Yeah, I would imagine.
It was a lot of fun to do this story, and work in this world. And if the anthology is successful, we might be doing more with it. Besides myself and Jonathan Mayberry, and I don't remember all the authors, but I know Greg Frost, Yvonne Navarro, Nancy Holder, and a bunch of others all have stories in there. And I apologize to the other contributors for I'm at a convention and my brain is mush. And hopefully there'll be more of that. I've got another character, a Key West-based urban fantasy character, who was in a story I did for an anthology called Tales from the House Band, Volume 1. I'm doing another story for Volume 2. And a story involving her for the 4th Badass Fairies anthology, which hopefully will be out next year.
Well, good to see that your music is actually influencing your writing and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. It has in other ways too. Besides the Cassie Zukov stories, which includes she hangs out with a band that plays every night at a bar on Duval Street. My first supernatural novel actually made a lot of use of my experience as a musician, both with the Boogie Nights and previously with the Don't Quit Your Day Job Players, playing with the Don't Quit Your Day Job Players, and that was a gag name that stuck. But we actually played a lot of New York clubs and county and state fairs and other gigs, and we also played science fiction conventions. So I got to see a lot of that particular music scene, which is much different from the what you think of as, the big stadium shows, the arena shows of the big name stars. The life of a working musician at a local level is so completely different, I had a character in the supernatural novel, somebody that Sam and Dean were helping, who was a lead singer in a band that plays regularly at some bar up in West. They do covers of old classic rock songs at a bar up in Westchester, and they don't make a huge amount of money at it, but it's it's a steady thing, and it's what they do. They have a small following, and that life is just, it was fun to tap into that and show that end of it. And that's with the Cassie stories, it's a similar thing as well. So.
Anything you'd like to add? Anything we didn't cover?
Oh God, amazing! Quite a bit actually. There's another shared world thing I didn't mention called The Scattered Earth, which is a science fiction thing I'm doing with Aaron Rosenberg and David Neal Wilson. The first book in that is called Guilt and Innocence, and that's out now, and there'll be a sequel, and some short stories in that as well. I also do a whole bunch of podcasts. I'm part of the Chronic Rift podcast, which is a pop culture one, where we do interviews, reviews, roundtable discussions. I have my own podcast called Dead Kitchen Radio, the Keith R. A. DeCandido podcast. Mostly I talk about my various projects and things. I do a lot of readings on it as well. And that comes out on or about the 1st and 15th of every month.
Great.
And I got to mention the rewatch because I'm having so much fun with that. I am doing a Star Trek The Next Generation rewatch for Tor Books. That's twice a week. Currently Tuesdays and Fridays, and I'm watching an episode of Next Generation and talking about it, and that's been great fun. As we record this, I'm about halfway through the 4th season.
Cool, very cool. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Keith. And
Thank you for having me. And if you want to find out more, my website is decandido.net.
Decandido.net.
And that's, or decandido.net if you want to mispronounce it. And that's a gateway to everything I'm doing. You can order my books from there. It's a gateway to the various podcasts and to the Boogie Nights that I'm with and other stuff. So.
And we will mention that at the end of the video. So
Excellent.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.